going to Melbourne, that high-speed chicane, what a disaster that was. At that point, we are facing the season of potentially scoring 0 point. In Baku 23, I was ready to quit.
When Guenther was in charge, could you not go to him and say, Guenther, the communication's not working here, let's sort this out?
I tried my best. Coming season, no doubt it's going to be a tough season. We are still the smallest team. We're making lots of improvement, huge regulation change. We are up against it.
Never fear a storm.
Be ready to adapt.
The skill is staying true to ourselves.
Ayo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So last season, you got your second best ever points finish with the Haas Formula One team. Rewind to the very first race of the season, and I bet you would never have imagined that you would finish so strongly.
Yeah, absolutely. That first race in Melbourne, as soon as the car started running in FP1, as soon as I realized how big the issue was, that was really sickening. At that point, we are facing the season of potentially scoring 0 point. Because we are not just slowest, we were the slowest by like 6/10. We had a huge problem.
So when did you first realize that the car wasn't what you thought?
Lap 2 of FP1. Yeah.
What are you thinking at that point?
Yeah, no. So FP1, you start running very fast lap. Okay, I looked at those high speed corners. Okay, we are very slow, but it's lap 1. It's okay. Maybe your driver's just doing a sighting lap. Then you cool down the tires and then you go again. Second lap, it should be not your quickest lap, obviously, but should be not a huge amount off. Miles and miles off. It's like you are going through wet patch, right? Then I realized, okay, we got some serious problem. Then by the end of FP1, it was totally clear we got some serious issue. Then the focus is, okay, between FP1 and FP2, what can we do to mitigate this issue, to see if that's something we can solve with the reasonably big change on the car setup. Then by the end of FP2, I had to know that's something we can deal with the setup or not. Then by the end of FP2, so by the end of Friday, it was totally clear that is a serious fundamental flaw.
So you tried everything on the Friday and nothing would make the car quicker, really?
Yeah, I wouldn't say everything because you only got like an hour to do it or 2 hours to do it if you include FP1. So, but we made a big change on the car so that we look at those two extremes. If it doesn't make enough difference, there is nothing we can do unless we change the car fundamentally.
Wow. So how do you get to the first race of the season with a car that is way slower than you think?
Because again, the circuit characteristics we've been testing in Bahrain, right? Been focusing on the race distance. We did some qualifying simulation, but Bahrain is a circuit where really doesn't have challenging high-speed corners and doesn't have that dips or bumps, right? So it didn't have that dynamics that excites that weakness in the car. So it's a total surprise to us when we turned up in Melbourne. Honestly, we left Bahrain thinking, okay, we got decent race car, we should be okay. Then going to Melbourne, that high-speed chicane, oh my God, what a disaster that was. Honestly, that was shock, huge shock.
So what was the problem?
Problem is basically the car completely gives up at that dynamics high-speed change of direction. That driver have essentially no downforce, no grip. That's why he had to go so much. I can't remember the speed delta anymore because it's such a long time ago. It feels like years ago. But race 1 this season. And then literally, it's like you are on a completely different surface, like a wet surface. It was that much difference. Of course, we are in Melbourne, right? But first race, our technical director was there. Our performance director was there. Of course, I was there. And then we in the Melbourne time, but it kind of worked in the way that them, with the time differences, we didn't sleep much. Really, we've been talking with Europe when we should be sleeping in Australia, but you can't sleep anywhere when you got such a huge issue. It was literally sickening. But then, honestly, I was happy with the alignment we had, and then people just working together. Really, there's no politics, no finger pointing, saying who decided this or nothing like this. Right, we got this issue. This is the direction. This is what we need to do. Right, how are we gonna do it? Get on with it. So we didn't waste any time.
And what about your drivers? Because you have 2 new drivers at this point. And Ollie Bearman has never driven a Haas before. Esteban Ocon has never driven a Haas before in a race weekend. And suddenly, I'm sure they're looking at you going, what have you given me? Like, what? I can't race this car.
100%. And yes.
Were they angry or were they worried? What?
Of course, we are all worried because, again, same as me, I never faced anything like this before. The problem was big. you are 6/10 slower than next slowest car.
And in F1, that's a
It's a lifetime. Yeah. So, yeah, but then again, like Esteban just said, you cannot drive this car through this corner. Yeah, you can see other corners he can drive, no problem. These types of corner, it's not even close. You literally cannot drive. And then to make the matter worse, then FP1, Oli Bearman crashed on the corner straight away, right? So he did minimum running on Friday. And then I said to Oli on Friday night, look, I need you tomorrow. You really need to do laps tomorrow because so far we only got Esteban's feedback. Based on Esteban's feedback, this is undrivable. I can see that on the data, but I really need your feedback. And then what happened in FP3? He crashed again. So
and was he crashing because of the car?
No.
Right.
No. So that Friday might have been because it's the same corner. And then, we couldn't pinpoint exactly, but definitely there's an underlying issue there. Maybe Oli was able to deal with it better than Esteban. I don't know. But anyway, bottom line is he crashed heavily on Friday, did 0 laps, right? The FP3, the way he crashed had nothing to do with the issue of the car. I can't even remember. I think it's the first push lap going into one of the last corner after the high-speed chicane. So, yeah.
Worst nightmare.
Absolutely worst nightmare. So now I had 0 feedback from Oli. Then, of course, Sunday was wet. So, but we just got to take Esteban's feedback and what happened on Esteban's car. And then, but at least the data showed that we clearly got an issue.
Yeah.
So we are tackling it. But what we didn't know was if Oli was driving, would he have had the same level of issue or would he be able to drive a bit better? But regardless, that was a huge issue. So we didn't have to argue about it.
So you go to Australia at the start of the 2025 season with the slowest car by a long way.
Yeah.
One driver who's crashed in 2 of the 3 practice sessions.
Yeah.
A car that can't be changed in time for China.
Yeah.
A factory working overtime to get a new car ready for the Japanese Grand Prix, but you're not able to do the usual wind tunnel and CFD work to get that new car ready.
Yeah.
Yet we now sit here.
Yeah.
You've had your second best season ever.
Yeah.
You've got your joint best ever finish 4th in the Mexico Grand Prix.
Yeah.
So how do you now reflect on what you did as a team in 2025?
What makes me really proud of our team is how we reacted from that situation. I always say to people, the failure doesn't define us. We had a big mistake in the Qatar pit stop as well. That kind of disaster doesn't define us. What defines us is how we get up from that as a team together. And I'm so proud that from that Melbourne disaster, honestly, you couldn't have had worse race 1. It is a huge issue. Nobody knows how to solve it at that moment. Nobody panicked. Everybody worked together, helped each other, got on with it. And all the production guy, program management guy, the same thing. Once the engineering, technical director, performance director, aero guys decide this is how we're going to make a modification. Got on with it, made a modification, made one part available straight away for Friday running, FP1 running in Suzuka. So then once we run it in Suzuka, back to back across the cars, it was clear. It's definitely the right direction. It made a positive difference. So again, like we proved it as a team, if we stick together, help each other, encouraging each other, no politics, no finger pointing, we can solve anything, right? And then come through that from that point, because we had to solve that specific issue. That means like on the upgrade, we couldn't focus on the outright performance. We had to solve the bad characteristics of the car first. Then we had to deal with that in Suzuka, we had to deal with that in Imola. So the first time you can put, let's say, your more traditional upgrade to the car was Silverstone. But then Silverstone, bang, on Friday, you can see straight away cars a lot faster. Then we did it again in Austin. So that proved in 2 years in a row for the team. Lots of people said Haas may start the season well, but cannot develop the car. Update is waste of time, waste of money. No, I always believed that's not right. That's an excuse. We should be able to do it. We did it in 24. We did it last year in 25. So that gives people lots of confidence. So yeah, it's just a teamwork, but I'd say if that Melbourne issue in 25 happened 6 months earlier, so let's say mid-24, we probably disintegrated, because throughout 24, I believe we built this foundation of teamwork, trust, transparency, the right culture. We started building up this culture of a proper race team. So by the time that disaster struck in Melbourne, at least we had that 12 months to build that foundation. people trust each other. We know that we're not having any blame culture, finger pointing. We just got to work together. Only thing important is find the solution. And how you support each other when the time is tough is so important, right? It's very easy to deal with everything when things are going so swimmingly. But test of character happens when things are not going very well. And I'm really, really proud to say that everyone there really showed their character in such a positive way and then got out of the mess.
So in the period before you became the team principal, if this kind of thing had happened, what was the reaction in that time?
Would have been certain people not to start off is I don't think we'd have had alignment on accepting what the fundamental issues are, because communication was a disaster, right? And also the transparency in terms of politics, etc. Communication is such a key, by the way, just to put everybody on the same page and also create a safe space that, look, nobody's worried about, nobody's, blaming each other. Only thing important now is to find the solution, right? Professionally. That wasn't happening before. So before, if this would have happened like 2-3 years ago, it would have been just arguing forever about what the real issue is.
And why had Haas got to this point where you weren't communicating very well with your operations in different countries? There was a lot of politics. There was a lot of finger pointing. Why had that been allowed to become what your team was?
There's, I think, many dimensions, but if I just talk about what I've done since I became team principal in January, honest, first thing, I spent 1 week, sit down with as many people as possible in Banbury, UK, because that's where I'm based, one-to-one group sessions, bigger sessions, small sessions, just try to tell them my philosophy, but also listen to them, how they see as a problem, why we couldn't understand the issue of 23.
And what were they saying to you?
It's interesting. So UK side, I knew better, but Italy side was more interesting because I'm not based in Italy, right? And then previously I've had, because I was on the truck side, I've heard quite a lot about, I was complaining about this, but it's not true and all sorts of things. But it's interesting, as soon as I've done exactly the same thing in Italy for 1 week, sit down one-to-one, lots of people said to me, we weren't clear what the problem of 23 car was. I was like, you joking? Because, we are doing this debrief. We've been telling, exactly what the truck side feedback was and then what the driver say. But then, Ayao, you say that in your debrief, but then afterwards, certain people would say, no, that's not really the issue. So go and do something else. But, I think for me, it's absolutely normal and okay to have disagreement, right? But at some point, somebody needs to take a decision which direction to go. Either it's a team principal or technical director or head of aero, doesn't matter, right? But whenever somebody takes that decision, I think that decision needs to be made transparently, right? If there's a 10, let's say, senior engineer in the room, not everybody is going to agree what the biggest issues are. But if direction was made, okay, we're going to go into this direction, at least everybody needs to understand why we are going to that direction, even if you don't agree. But that kind of alignment, transparency wasn't there. So there were so many people didn't know why we are developing the car in this direction.
And were you not able to do anything about it before you were the team principal? When Guenther was in charge, could you not go to him and say, Guenther, the communication's not working here. Let's sort this out.
I think we should talk about 24 onwards probably. But I tried my best.
But you couldn't make a difference?
Yes. No, I mean, yes.
Does that make you feel a bit helpless though?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if I'm totally honest, I was ready to quit in Baku 23.
Why?
Because I just couldn't see how we can move forward like this. People not talking to each other, no transparency, no alignment, no transparent discussion. And it's just people not going in the same direction, unified direction. We are not behaving as a team. And I felt like I put everything on the table, but in my humble view, it wasn't happening. So I don't like to waste my time. I'm not interested in just turning up at the racetrack just to make up numbers. So if we are not moving forward, but then I was very close to just walk. But what stopped me walking is like I felt a big responsibility. There's people who rely on me and people who's depending on me to make a difference. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to walk until I've done everything, or it's not my choice, if you like. So I wasn't going to just leave the people I care just behind. That's the only reason I didn't leave in 23.
Yeah. Man, that's hard for you because you're someone that loves the sport so much and you've seen good practices. You've worked in teams where communications are excellent, haven't you?
Yeah. Absolutely. Like Enstone, when I was working Enstone, so I joined Enstone in 2006.
Yeah.
Again, so I came from the team called BR Honda, which was a much bigger team than Enstone, but Enstone was winning championships. They won the championship in 2005 with Fernando. I joined in 2006 as a tire engineer. And then the group I was in, so vehicle performance group, at BR Honda, it was like 20 people, 25 people. Enstone, when I joined, I think it was around 8 people. But it was amazing. The difference was that those 8 people, all of them contributed directly to performance. So that's the difference. And then back then at Enstone, we had a really clear backbone of the team. We had obviously Pat Simmons, James Harrison, Dino Toso, head of aero, Bob Bell. All those guys are the core senior member of the team. And then it was pure race team. So anything needed to be done, going to those 5 or 6 key people. And if one of them or they agree, okay, this is what we're doing, we just go. So it was very efficient and then clear leadership. So that was the difference. So I've seen it, like you say.
You know, there's a moment every evening where I look at the kids and I look at the work that I still need to do and I look at the week ahead of me and I realise that basically recovery from Monday to Friday is not something that I get to schedule. I mean, I need it to happen in the background basically while life keeps on moving forwards. And this is one thing that has helped me to achieve it. This is called Vitals by Heights. And inside these capsules are 20 essential nutrients, including omega-3 DHA for brain power, all the Bs for energy and vitamin D3. And this is formulated and tested by scientists and dietitians. Long days, early mornings, back-to-back records, late night projects, some kids' parties at the weekend, maybe just going out for dinner with my friends has to fit in there as well. Whatever it is that's taking up the hours in each week, Vitals just keeps me sharp and ready to go for each one of those moments. And by the way, this is ridiculously easy. It takes about 6 seconds, but you will feel the benefits all day long. 2 tablets with some water. Join the thousands of people sorting their health out. Just go to heights.com/Jake or enter code HP20 at checkout for 20% off your first month. So much of our life happens online now. Our work, staying in touch with friends, finding new information. But what we often forget is that means a lot of our personal data is online as well, sometimes without you even realizing it. I think you'd be surprised actually what's out there about you. Not just your name or your email address, but your job history, your shopping habits, even things like health information or your political views. A full profile of your life on websites that you've never even heard of. And that risk is only growing. You know, data breaches are rising every year, which means you, your colleagues, or your kids could have their personal details exposed online at any time. And that can open the door to scams or identity theft. But that's where Incogni comes in. It's a data removal service that finds and deletes your information from the internet and keeps checking back to make sure it stays gone. Incogni's customer removals feature lets you report any website sharing your personal data, and their privacy experts handle the removal process for you. So take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code HIGHPERFORMANCE at the link below and get 60% off an annual Incogni subscription. Let's talk then about your 2 drivers that drove for you last season. Ollie Bearman and Esteban Ocon. How do they differ?
They're very, very different. You know, Ollie, he's such an exciting young kid. You know, we've been working with him since he was 18.
Yeah.
Right? I just couldn't believe it. You know, first time I worked with him in Mexico, FP1, 18 years old. You know, the maturity he had in understanding what the team needed from him, what the program is all about, what role he needed to play. Not just, okay, I want to prove to everyone in the world how quick I am. Right? Speed was clear from day one. But what I was most impressed was his maturity, understanding of the bigger picture, understanding what role he's playing. So mature and how quickly he runs, right? So to me, it was clear that he was a future talent. And then in 24, we worked with him through 6 FP1s. Again, every single time he proved like, okay, this kid is a real deal. And then, of course, he did amazing things with Ferrari in Saudi, P7 when he jumped for us in Baku, and then Interlagos. He did absolutely amazing job. So it was no-brainer that we wanted to sign him for a race drive last year for 25. And then again, the biggest challenge for us was to build up the consistency. Speed, again, is no doubt. He's incredibly quick, amazing talent. Such a positive kid as well. But again, like at beginning of the season, even though he showed the flashes of talent, he just struggled to put a weekend together. Some silly mistakes like Monaco, overtaking car under red flag, or Silverstone, car was so quick, right? So quick. And then at the end of the session, when there's a red flag, he decided to attack the pit lane entry and having a crash. And of course, under red flag to have a crash is a huge no-no, right?
Yeah.
So gets 10 place grid penalty. Right. So things like that really was a tough lesson. But then again, we all together, worked together and then worked with everybody around Ori's engineers, Ori himself, of course. And then we just came away, and finally in Singapore, he was able to put the weekend together. And Singapore is a tough track, and he never raced there before. And Esteban was very, very quick from the beginning. But that was the weekend where, okay, right, good. Now we finally done it. This is the baseline. And then if you look at all the races after that, he's been very, very consistent putting weekend together. And then that Mexico P4, what can I say? He was incredible. He had a Max behind him first stint, and he had George and Antonelli behind second stint, third stint George and Piastri, right? All top teams, top drivers. Then from outside, looks like, does he feel pressure? Of course he's feeling the pressure. He didn't put a foot long. Amazing. The amount of improvements he made, maturity as a human being, amazing guy. And
those moments of inconsistency, like I would look at it and go, well, he knows to lift off under a red flag. Like he knows not to overtake someone when there's a red flag at Monaco or what happened at Silverstone. So what happens to a young driver in those moments, do you think?
I think his judgment, obviously, I think that was Sainz in Monaco. He was coming through certain high speed chicane, not the high speed chicane, one of the chicanes, I think. And then he just approached a bit too quickly, right? But then he could have maybe he didn't have to completely stamp on the brakes not to overtake. But if he had overtaken him, he could have done this, completely slow down and let him pass again, at least to show that, look, I'm trying to slow down, I slow down. But he just, once he's ahead, he just kept being ahead and went into the pit lane. So it's just a small, let's say, judgment. Like, attacking pit lane entry in Silverstone. Of course, he wanted to try attacking pit lane entry for practice, but, come on, it's red flag.
Yeah.
Just bring her home. But just that tiny bit of split seconds decision making.
And how would you manage him where you need to explain to him that was not acceptable in Silverstone, but at the same time, you need to take into account that he's in his rookie season?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, just you need to be able to have a tough conversation.
Yeah.
But I think to be able to have a tough conversation, you have to build a relationship of trust, relationship of respect. And then that's foundation to anything. It's like I remember 2024 with Nico Hülkenberg. I was very, very happy the relationship we built together. And I believe Nico was performing at his best throughout the season. Yeah. And we really enjoyed it. That was a new, let's say, benchmark. So when I signed the new drivers, Ori and Esteban for 25, I just said to myself, look, I got to build up the same level of relationship that I achieved with Nico Hülkenberg with Ori and Esteban, no doubt. So again, so just being who you are, but being transparent, and then nothing is a personal attack, but you got to be able to have those tough conversations. And then Ori is very, very open in that respect. So, if you cannot have those tough conversations, you cannot improve.
So when Oli got it wrong in Silverstone or Monaco, did you go and speak to him directly, or do you speak to his people and explain to them?
No, you got to speak to person directly. Yeah. If I've got issue with you, what's the best way to tackle it? You got to be sincere and then talk to you directly, but in a very, let's say, transparent manner, respectful manner, so that if you go in there, you'd understand that this is nothing me personal against you. We're only trying to understand how we can improve you. And you got to be sincere about it. It's no point talking with somebody else. It's just a filter.
And what made you want to sign Esteban Ocon?
Esteban, so we knew that obviously we were signing Ori, right? So then I cannot have two rookies. I needed to have somebody who's got experience, who can provide a benchmark. But then also I wanted somebody who's got really good work ethic, because we are still the smallest team. We are still the very young team. So we really need a driver at the center pushing for development in the right direction. I didn't need a driver, some superstar driver who turns up for the race weekend, drive the car and go home. I really needed somebody who's really got a hard work ethic that can drive the team forward off the track as well as on the track. And then Esteban is that. Esteban, I think his father or his family put a lot on the table to continue Esteban to drive. I think they even saw the home. I think they were living in some sort of like a caravan house or motorhome or something for some time to fund Esteban's karting. So Esteban never forgets that. So until he achieved the ultimate, which is the World Championship, he would never lift. He would go to any lengths to find the performance from himself, from the team, from the car. That's somebody, that's the kind of person I needed for the team. So that's why we signed Esteban. And, he's been racing in F1 for by then 9 years. And he's a race winner, podium finisher. He's scored so many points. He's got proven track record, but he's still so hungry. That's exactly the person we needed.
And I'm interested in how you find out how hungry someone is, or how you work out whether they are a team player or whether they just say the right things that they want you to hear. So would you take us into the process of how you hire a Formula One driver? Because I think no one knows how this happens. They just see a social media post one day, say Esteban Ocon is joining Haas.
Yeah.
But no one knows how long you've been talking, where you've spoken, what really happens.
Yeah, with Esteban, I think first time I spoke to him in person was after Miami. Of course, I knew Esteban since a long time ago. I knew Esteban when he was 13 because I was at Enstone. He was one of the gravity driver and he was still a kid. Yeah, obviously 13. And then didn't speak much English, actually. I think he was still racing in go-kart or maybe just finished racing in go-kart. Right. And we actually did some 12 hours race together, I think just for fun. But so I knew him since then and I actually ran his car, the very first test he did in Valencia in F1 car.
You ran his car?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you had history.
Yeah. So I knew him. But then since I left Renault, since he actually left that gravity, he went to become a Mercedes driver. Of course, I kept saying hello to him when I see him on the track, but it's not like we kept in a close touch. But then when I spoke to him, sat down with him after Miami in 24, it's like we never left again. So I wasn't doing the sales pitch either. I was merely, at that point, it was just a conversation. It's not like I really want to sign this guy.
And what were you saying to him?
I was just saying to him, like, look, where we are, who we are as a team, what our vision is, what we're trying to do in the future. I just said that, and then Esteban really bought into that idea. He really wanted to be part of it. So yeah, that was amazing.
And what was he buying into? Because like every F1 driver, if you say, what's your dream? He will say, be the world champion.
Of course.
It's a hard case to explain to a driver you can be the world champion with Haas, right?
So, yeah, of course I didn't say that at all.
So how do you convince him to join your team?
I actually didn't. I didn't, like I said, I didn't do a sales job.
Really?
I just essentially told him, who we are, where we are now, what's the current status, what's the vision about building the team forward. Of course, I didn't say, 10 years time, we're going to be world champion or you're going to have podium in 5 years time if you come with us. None of that. I simply told him where we are now.
And what did you say, though, about where you are and where you're going that made him excited?
I think the fact that he felt that we are just focused on being more competitive. Yeah. We are a race team. We are not corporate. Our single ultimate objective is a sporting result. Yeah. At some point, of course, we're going to challenge for world championship, but we are miles away from that. So at the moment, I can say that in 3 to 5 years' time, I'd like to think we can be fighting towards the top of the midfield consistently. But I didn't even say that. I just said, because that was middle of 24, obviously, I was 6 months into the job. I'm still trying to make our technical department to work, but then I can see it started working, but there's still lots to do, right? So I was saying like, okay, how I see the problem of the current team, how I'm addressing it, how we are going forward with it together, and what's the visions for next year. That's about that, really. Really no, let's say fancy story. But I think he understood that we are serious. We are really focused on making the team more competitive with clear vision, clear alignment, clear strategy. I think that's what he got excited about.
And I think he gets, or certainly before this season we just had in 2025, I felt he got unnecessary criticism, actually. And I was never really sure why. You've now seen him close up as a Formula One driver. how good is Esteban Ocon?
When you say like unnecessary criticism, what aspect you're talking about? Like crashing into teammate, for
Yeah,
example?
that's exactly what I'm thinking
because
about.
it's funny because like when I announced signing Esteban Ocon, so many journalists said that to me.
Yeah.
But then I said, look, I'm not worried whatsoever. Why? Because to me, that's about management, about transparency, about respect. Teams and drivers, they need to have a clear rule of engagement. If the driver trusts the team's message clearly and the team trusts the driver, problem will not happen.
That's interesting. So when you see an issue in a team, you don't look at the driver and think the driver's the problem. You look at the communication, the way they're being managed, the processes.
But of course, at other teams, I don't know the full story, right? So I'm not judging their situation at all. But what I believe is if we take Esteban in our environment, it's our responsibility to create that transparent environment where drivers, not just Esteban, both Oli and Esteban, trust the team completely. Even if we have to, let's say, swap the drivers around, they need to know why we are doing it. Afterwards, they may not know at that point because they don't have the full picture, but they got to be able to trust us and saying, okay, team is making this decision, not because they want to favor one driver or another, because this is the best for the team. And as long as we got the open communication policy, transparency, if we got the trust, whatever the situation, we can solve it. And then probably in terms of that teammate dynamics, the best thing happened is Silverstone. In the race, we are not very competitive. Our car was competitive, but we completely messed up the race strategy because our mindset was wrong. Anyway, that's another story. But our drivers essentially crashed each other. Not a heavy crash, but completely unnecessary. And then three of us sat down straight away after the race. I said what I had to say and asked Oli and Esteban their opinion, views on what happened. Of course, their views were very different, right? But that's fine because it's straight after the race. Still emotions high, right? Then all I said was, okay, we basically got to sort this out before next race. And then you got, let's say, 1 week to sort this out. And I'm sure you guys can come to agreement. So next time we're meeting, I can't remember what race was after Silverstone. I can't remember. Let's say if it was, Budapest. By the time we turn up in Budapest, let's have a chat. If we haven't come to agreement, I'll make the rule, right? But it's better if you come to agreement because I'm not the one driving the car, right? So then, of course, they spoke and then they come to agreement. Since then, there's been zero issue.
What was the agreement that they came to when they spoke?
I didn't even ask.
Did you not?
I don't need to know because I'm not driving the car. If both drivers agree, that's fine.
So you're also showing great trust in them at that point.
Absolutely. You got to.
So when you met up at the race after the British Grand Prix and you said to them, have you spoken? What did they say?
Yeah, they came to agreement, yeah.
And you then said, okay.
That's fine. That's all I need to know. Then I'm pretty sure problem is going to happen. If it happened again, then I have to step in, but I was pretty confident it wouldn't. Then again, great example, Spa. So Spa Francorchamps in sprint qualifying, we qualified P5, P7, and we had a chat before sprint because P5, P7, great price. We got to really convert, but Spa, fast lap, after Eau Rouge, down that Kemmel straight, going to the chicane, right? Anything can happen, right? If we are fighting between P5 and P7 and make a mess, somebody from just behind us, P8, P9 guys can overtake us, that we cannot let that happen. So how are we going to do about it? And then again, initially they said, okay, during the race, we're going to do this. Fine. Apart from lap 1. Okay, what are you going to do in lap 1 then? That was important. And then again, if they don't come up with a solution, I had to make a rule. But then that's never going to be great because I'm not a driver, right?
Yeah.
So they know the best, how they can manage. Then they made certain agreement. Okay, in this scenario, I have to do this. Otherwise, I'm going to get overtaken. But when I'm going to do this, I'm going to put my car here so you can do this. So they had a clear alignment even on lap 1, right? Okay, in that particular scenario, didn't happen, but we are ready. If that was going to happen, we had a clear rule of engagement and understanding. Great, right? And then we converted that to P5, P7. And for the main race as well, because of the weather, we put one car on high downforce, one car on low downforce. So depending on the weather condition, one car is going to be much faster than the other. We cannot hold each other up, right? Again, we spoke before the race. And then we agreed, okay, in this condition, we're going to let this guy through straight away before that chicane or whenever. Sometimes we cannot even wait until next straight. We just do it straight away. But when I tell you, you have to do it straight away, right? Then they both agreed. But in the race, I didn't even have to say, because about when the lap, I was about thinking, okay, half a lap later, I'm going to have to instruct a swap. Esteban came on the radio, said, Oli is much faster in this condition. I let him through here, let him know. Did it by themselves.
So who said that? Esteban?
Esteban.
So
yeah.
Esteban himself volunteered the fact that Oli could come through?
Yeah, at
Wow.
that point, yeah. So again, that's the teamwork.
Yeah.
And then Oli knows that in the opposite situation, that Oli would do the same, Esteban the same. So it's great. Honestly, it's about building up that transparency and trust. If drivers cannot trust the team, it's not, then issue will happen. If the rule of engagement wasn't clear, imagine that lap one in Spa situation. If it wasn't clear, either hold the position or you're free to race, but if you put, what's the limit as a teammate? That had to be clear. If there's no clarity, things can happen. Then things can break, people can start blaming each other. But just to be upfront about it and having that clarity, that's important.
And do you think actually, in hindsight, the coming together in Silverstone was a good thing?
Yeah, that's why I said, yeah, absolutely, yeah. At the time, it was painful. It's like, oh my God, I cannot believe, after 7 races or whatever, we've done that. But luckily, we've done that at, let's say, when the stakes are low, only because we made a mess of the strategy.
I think one of the really impressive things about you is that you're an engineer, right?
Yeah.
But you have this ability to understand human beings, and particularly human beings who sit behind the wheel of a race car.
Yeah. But human beings are the most interesting thing.
More interesting than the numbers and the data.
Yeah, at the end of the day, human beings create those numbers, right?
Yeah.
And the human beings are the ones interpreting those numbers. And the human beings are the ones making decisions, right? So if you don't understand human beings, like drivers, they're not robots, right? They got emotions, they got good days and bad days. So you got to understand how to get performance out of them, performance out of team, performance out of engineers. So my job is to get performance out of team, individuals, groups. So yeah, I'm naturally interested in human being anyway. So yeah.
So if we rewind the clock to the days when you were working with Fernando Alonso, for example, in the same team as him, what did you learn from Fernando as one of the greats?
So I was tire engineer, right? This is 20 years ago. So again, when I say about, interested in human beings, of course, life experience counts a lot. I'm now 20 years older than I was. So my life experience is totally different. But when I was a young tire engineer, working with Fernando on the tire testing on the Michelin tire, it was amazing that his capability or his, if you say to Fernando, okay, we're going to have to do 15 laps or 20 laps race simulation or race stint simulation. I want to use up tires in this way. Last 4 or 5 laps, you got to improve lap time this much. And then by the end lap of sector 2, I want this tire to be completely finished. He's incredible. He knows how he drives in fast 5 laps. He knows exactly what that tire is going to do in 20 laps time. That's the talent, right? It's incredible. Yeah. It's incredible. He basically, when you instruct him like this, he basically goes, watch. And he just goes and does it. Incredible.
Because when he was at Ferrari, he drove me around the track at Maranello.
Oh, really?
And I was gripping on the side of the seat because he was going fast.
Sure.
And he looked at me and laughed.
Of course.
And he said, don't worry, I know the track quite well. And he closed his eyes and for like 3 corners, drove around and I was like, okay, this is a guy on another level to most people.
No, it's crazy. I mean, for him, driving's, I wouldn't say automatic, but almost like automatic. Yeah. Something just happens. He can drive car at such a high level without using, let's say, 10% of his mental capacity. But that's the difference though between good drivers and top drivers. Top drivers, they have so much spare capacity to optimize everything else. I remember one race Fernando was doing, I can't remember which year, but he was leading and then he got bored. Obviously his lap time has been great, right? Yeah. So nothing to suggest he's bored, but of course he was bored because it's so easy for him. Then I remember, I think he radioed back to the team, said there's going to be safety car, right? Then we had no idea. Then after the race, he told me because he was bored, he was watching the big TV screen, he saw somebody crashing somewhere or something. So he noticed this, so he told us. And also I remember, I think, was it Budapest one year? I think French TV wanted to do an interview with Fernando. Basically, he wanted, the TV company wanted Fernando to talk through a lap. So he was doing that, talking on the radio, going through Budapest Hungaroring. And I can't remember the lap time he was doing, but I thought he was going to drive like, I don't know, 10 seconds off the pace.
Yeah.
But he was doing pretty decent lap time. But if you listen to his radio, it's so calm, as if he's sitting on the sofa at home, yet he's driving the car not too far from the limit. It's incredible.
And he had and still maybe less so, but certainly had a reputation of being quite a fiery character back in those days. Did you ever see that or not?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I think when we had a 1-2 finish in Malaysia, because I think Fizzy won there and Fernando second. I don't think he was happy.
Why not?
Because he didn't win, his teammate
Because
won.
his teammate won.
Yeah. But back then, Enstone was all about Fernando. You know?
Really?
Yeah, of course. He was the main driver. He and rightly so. But just losing, finishing second behind his teammate, he wasn't happy. And I remember, and also like much later on, not the same year, I can't remember the year, but I was on a Nelson Piquet Jr.'s car. I think we got podium in Hockenheim in a certain specific scenario, because I think to do with safety cars or etc. I can't remember the details anyway. So Nelson finished ahead of Fernando. Fernando wasn't happy again.
But this is the interesting thing, now that you're not a tire engineer, that you're the team principal, you kind of you want your drivers to be team players. You want your drivers to please the sponsors. You want your drivers to see the bigger picture. You want your drivers to work well together.
Yeah.
But you also want a driver that has that thing that Ayrton Senna has, that Lewis Hamilton has, that Max Verstappen has, that Fernando Alonso has, that Michael Schumacher had, that edge where they also just want to destroy their teammate, right?
Of course, everybody does.
How do you get that balance then?
Yeah, because you got to look at the moment that matters and moment they got to work for the team. It's too different. If you ask me the question about, let's say McLaren, the good example, Norris and Piastri, it's a totally different situation to manage. Both of them are going for drivers' championship. Our guys, Oli and Esteban, they're not going for drivers' championship. So in a way, it's much easier for me to manage that. Imagine if we have this situation where, let's say, Esteban and Oli is going for, both got chance to win the drivers' championship. Then to having this rule of engagement, working for the team in this clear manner, will be another step more difficult. Yeah. But there's a time you have to let them completely race. Most of the times you let them race completely, fair and square. As long as you don't touch, it's fine. Free to race. We say that every time. But definitely when you get to the situation where you're like a McLaren last year, Norris and Piastri is going for championship, it's a much more difficult environment.
And all of the fans have their opinion about Zach Brown's decision to let the drivers race and Andrea Stella's decision to let them race. What do the other team principals think of this idea where McLaren say they're free to race? If it costs us the world title, then it does, but they are free to race.
Huge respect. Whether I can take the same decision, I'd like to think I can say the same thing, but until I'm put in that situation, I don't know, right? So I have a huge respect in McLaren who let Norris and Piastri race, because that's what fans want to see, right? So it's brilliant.
So interesting, isn't it? Because I think if they said from the middle of the season, let's say if they said from, Zandvoort onwards, Oscar is now our favourite, Lando, you're going to support him, there'd be loads of criticism.
Yeah.
They then allow them to race to the point where I couldn't believe when Oscar overtook Lando in that first corner of the last race. Could you? I was like, wow, they are genuinely allowing them to fully race till the last race of the season.
No, it's a full credit to them. I think that's what fans wants to see.
But the fans would criticise if they just prioritise one driver, but they also criticise for letting them race. It almost feels to me like the one thing you could never do in Formula 1 is please everybody. No,
but so you got to have your belief and value, conviction, right? You got to execute what you believe is right. What believe is what is let's say in sync to your core value. So full respect to them for them letting them race each other like that. It's brilliant.
Would you say Fernando is the most naturally talented driver you've ever worked with?
Yeah, for out of the drivers I worked with, I'm naturally talented. It's very difficult to say because Romain Grosjean was very, very naturally talented. On his day, he was so quick. Oli Bearman is incredibly quick. So it's a bit difficult to say, hands down, he was most naturally gifted. But I'd say, people like Oli Bearman, Romain Grosjean, naturally very, very fast.
I've got a quote actually from, you said this about Romain many years ago, and I'm sure you remember it. You said everybody recognises his natural speed.
Yeah.
Everybody recognises his lack of consistency.
Yeah.
And the lack of progress that he's able to make because of sometimes the emotional side of things.
Yes.
Can you take us back to that period in Romain's career? And I'm really interested to talk to you about this because I think you and him had a really special relationship, and you went to Haas with him, and you were with him in some really great times, but some difficult times.
Yes. Yeah.
That period where like Mark Webber was calling him a first lap nutcase,
Yeah.
and he had that huge moment in Spa, and
Yeah.
there's a few things going on. Like, what was happening at that point with Romain?
Yeah. That was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And then I was very young as well as a race engineer. And then I don't think, if I had 5 years more life experience, I feel that I could have helped Romain in a different way. But as a race engineer or as a human being, I didn't have that life experience to help him more. So I felt really bad about it afterwards, to be
Really?
honest. Yeah, because it was very difficult. And in a way, it's almost nothing to do with racing. It's just about one human being, in terms of mindset, emotional status, etc. So, yeah, but then, great person Romain is. I remember catching up with Romain a few years ago in Brazil, just having a dinner together. And I said, Romain, to this day, I feel really bad that I couldn't have done more. If
we could go back to 2012 and what you know now as an experienced team principal, what would you have said to him?
At least I think, I don't know what I would have said to him, but at least I would have faced it more front on. Not front, more front up, not in terms of aggressiveness or anything. I wouldn't have shied away from certain aspects of his character.
And did you do that? You shied away from talking about
I think so,
things?
because I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know how I could help.
In what area?
It's about, like, for instance, the famous incident in Suzuka where he drove into Mark Webber. Then Mark Webber came after the race and then, came to Romain's room and, punching and kicking every single panels you can think of, and then stormed off. And then Romain crying on the floor, then
crying?
Then for me, like, if I was Romain, even if I was at fault, if somebody came kicking down all my panels, I would kick this guy out, right? Yeah. But he couldn't do that, So, but then in that emotional status, I didn't know what's the best way for me to help him, if you like. Yeah, I didn't tackle it head on.
What did you say to him at that point?
That's the issue. I couldn't offer anything, let's say, meaningful, right? But I think if I had more life experience, I could have treated it in a different way. I could have went through whatever the problem he had together a bit more, then that could have made a big difference. Now I know, but I just couldn't do it back then. But then when I met with Romain a few years ago in Interlagos, I said that, I really feel, I let you down by not being able to help you in that instance because I didn't have the life experience. I wish I had 5 years more life experience. I would have done it different. I would have, gone through the journey together with you to get you out of that hole, if you like, the rock bottom he was saying, not just in Suzuka, many other incidents, right? But Romain said to me, Ayao, we grew up together. I don't want Ayao with 5 more life experience back then. I wouldn't change anything. It's a great guy.
Yeah,
that's why you're a great friend.
For him to say.
Yeah, I know. For him to say that was, it was amazing. But I still feel I wish I could have done more.
I think one of the things that we often make a mistake with when it comes to people who are in the spotlight, and whether it's Formula One drivers or elite business people, top footballers, hugely famous people, we think that they're surrounded by information, surrounded by love, surrounded by praise. But actually the truth is, and Lando Norris has spoken about this in the last couple of years, is lonely.
Yes,
they are
lonely.
And I imagine Romain felt lonely at that point.
Absolutely. I remember after that Suzuka incident, I knew I was going to Tokyo, or he was going to Tokyo. I was in Tokyo as well. Yeah. But I didn't have a capacity to reach out to him and come on, let's just
have a beer.
Yeah, go and spend some time together. Let's just talk it through or whatever. Just to offer that emotional support. I didn't know what to do, and I was at my limit as well, right? So, yeah.
Man,
so if seriously, like if I was had 5 years more experience, I would have done it differently. I'm sure that would have made a difference. But for Roman to say that 3 years ago when I said that to him, that just shows that what a great guy he is. And then we are very good friends.
You'd obviously carried that, I think, hadn't you, for a long time? Yeah.
Of course, it's a responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, and then you want to do best possible, right? And then back then, of course, I knew I should be doing it better, but I just didn't know how.
You know, we had a great conversation on this show with Alex Albon,
Okay.
who spoke about his time at Red Bull.
Right.
And as the pressure increased, the desire to do well increased.
Yes.
So he drove the car harder, which then meant he made more mistakes. So the pressure increased. So the desire to do well increased. Do you feel that was maybe what was going on with Romain at that time? He was so desperate to not make another mistake that he did.
Yeah, one of the things with Romain that happened in India as well, he's very, very talented, right?
Yeah.
But so many people thought he was arrogant, but he's not arrogant, you know? He was so, in a way, insecure, lacking confidence. So I feel like every single time he went out on the track, even FP1 lap 1, he needed to put everything out there to prove to the world that he's the quickest guy out there. But of course, FP1 lap 1, you know, nobody cares. Yes, that's not true, but you don't need to show every time you go out there that you are try to show that you are the quickest guy. That's not how you should be approaching the weekend or FP1. But Romain was a bit like that. So I remember one year in India, the circuit, the grip level is so low. Like turn 1, he just kept locking up. He couldn't even make a corner. He couldn't even do a 1 lap without locking up really badly. Right? And he's saying like, no, this car's nowhere, blah, blah, blah. That was race engineer. So I looked at data against Kimi. Kimi Raikkonen was his teammate.
Yeah.
He's already braking a lot later than Kimi. And you can see on Kimi's data that he's on the verge of locking front or rear, right? But so Kimi's already here, but Romain trying to drive it there, but grip is not there, right? But even when I showed him that and told him that, he couldn't bring it back. And he kept saying, no, I should be able to brake there. I should be able to brake. No, you cannot. You know, Kimi is a very good driver. If he's on the limit here, that's the limit, bring it back. But he cannot do that. And of course, after that one, after the session, he was able to adjust it. And then I can't remember if that was the same year, but he finished second on the podium. So it's just such a fine balance. But, you know, what creates a disaster like that is also what makes him go unbelievably quick as well. Like we were talking about Bearman earlier. You know, he crashed in Melbourne. Like I was talking to him after Melbourne going to Shanghai. I said to Oli in Shanghai, your single objective this weekend is to do every single lap that is on the run program. Don't miss a single lap. You just got to do that. I don't care about lap time because you are quick. I do not care about lap time. Even if you ended this weekend half a second off Esteban Ocon, I don't care. I know your ability, but you got to do the laps.
That's so interesting because in that case, you're giving Ollie the freedom not to be fast.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to judge you for not being quick enough, but I will judge you if you can't get a full clean session.
Yeah, because he is quite, you know, capable of doing that. But it's interesting what Ollie said to me about Ayao. You know, so again, the year before, so I got Ollie last minute to race in Brazil. So because Kevin Magnussen wasn't very well. So I remember calling him 6 a.m. Ollie, are you up? Oh, I just woke up. By the way, can you drive in FP1 5 hours later because Kevin's not very well. So then he locked up without any preparation, right? Because he wasn't expecting to drive. Then I still remember FP1 lap 1, the lap he did, I just couldn't believe what I was saying. Incredible. No preparation, jump in the car with 5 hours notice. I just couldn't believe he can do that. So that very thing he said to me is the same thing as makes me crash in Melbourne, which is true because he's able to put the car on the limit straight away like that. But you just got to judge. It's just such a fine line going a tiny bit over crashing heavily like Melbourne or being a hero in Interlagos. Again, you know, when he raced for Ferrari in Saudi, because of Sainz's health issue, right? You know, he finished the race in P7, but that qualifying, I think he touched the wall a few times. You know, he had a great weekend, suddenly jumping in a car from FP3 onwards to produce that for Ferrari. But that was also millimeters away from a crashing in qualifying, a disaster, right? So like you said, it's a knife edge, but just trying to judge that all the way through the weekend. Of course, if this is the peak and this is a knife edge, you're not being on the right side of it until the very last moment. If somebody crashed in Q3, if Oli crashed in Q3 run 2, I don't blame him. You put everything on the line and then just a tiny bit over crashed. But like Baku, Q2 run 1, where there's no need to take that risk. And he was too much close to the edge and bit of a gust of tailwind, he crashed or touched the wall and broke suspension. So it's such a fine line.
So, do you think Ollie Bearman has the skills that it takes to be a world champion one day?
I think so. I don't see the limitation in him. He's brilliant. You know, the thing is, you got to have the speed to start off with. Romain had it. Ollie certainly has it. And then the way he's learning so quickly is impressive. You know, and then he's very, very open to, let's say, constructive criticism. Whenever I have a tough conversation, he knows that I'm not personally attacking him, right? So even if he disagrees, he at least listens and he takes it in, digests it, then action. So, and if you look at the consistency he achieved in the last half of the season from Singapore on, was impressive.
Yeah. I just want to interrupt this conversation very briefly to say, look who's here, my favourite physiologist, the amazing Ollie Patrick. I want to talk to you about one of my favourite pieces of wellness tech at the moment, my Bond Charge red light face mask. What is the science behind red light therapy?
So the red light from this device, it goes into your skin tissues and actually activates the batteries of the human body, the mitochondria, to produce more energy.
Now, we talk all the time on High Performance about habits. Every evening, I sit on the bed and I just have 10 minutes to myself and I just allow myself to luxuriate in the brightness of the mask.
I do the same. And so there's a lovely routine and ritual about that. That red light is pushing away some of the blue light of the days that inhibits my sleep. And it's a little bit of self-care for me.
And I know that people are watching us right now on YouTube going, those guys look 21. So we also know it's working.
The studies have shown there is an improvement visibly in wrinkles and collagen.
I wondered why I fancied you so much.
It's mutual.
If you're excited by this, go to bondcharge.com and use the code HP15 for 15% off everything across the site. I think most fans have said at some point, one day I'm going to follow a World Cup. It is the ultimate bucket list trip, right? It's certainly on my bucket list. And if you're going to do it, Seattle is the place to make it happen in 2026. Now, one of the things that I love about Seattle, and I've traveled all around the US, is how walkable and compact the place feels. So the stadium sits right next to downtown, so you can step out of the match and straight into the city's buzz. The weather is perfect for football. Those mild summer days that the city's famous for will make all the games feel enjoyable. Nature is everywhere. There's gorgeous waterfront views, breathtaking mountain backdrops. Honestly, this is like an American city where the outdoors always feels within reach. And when it's time to refuel, Seattle also delivers fresh seafood at Pike Place Market, world-class coffee, craft beer, and a wine scene that rivals the best. You can then cap off your day with skyline views from the Space Needle or sunset over Puget Sound. This isn't just a World Cup trip. This is an experience that you would never forget. If you want to discover more, go to visitseattle.org and start planning your perfect summer of football. Going back to Romain.
Yeah.
In that time where he was struggling,
Yeah.
I know that he went and saw a sports psychologist.
Yeah.
Did you notice a difference in his performances after that?
No.
No. It's interesting, isn't it? How we assume, if you go and see a sports psychologist, all your problems are solved.
No way. It's not like that. No, I think it's just one human being to one human being. It's not about sports psychology or, you got to really like open-hearted conversation and you got to find that person who's completely resonates and talk to you. So yeah, it's not like there's an easy solution. Okay, you got mental problem, you cannot understand how to prepare your weekend, I'll go and see the sports psychologist. No, that it may work if you find the absolutely the right person, you happen to find the right person, it may work, but I don't think it made much difference in that instance.
It's hard though, isn't it? Because I think we would both probably agree that Romain Grosjean had the raw material to be a Formula One world champion.
Yeah, I agree.
And he will know that.
Yeah, on his day, he was so quick. I remember going to Monaco. I think this is even like first year of partnership with Kimi. Kimi was still very, very fast that year. Going to Monaco, Romain put 7 tenths on Kimi, I think. It was incredible. I knew Romain was quick in Monaco, but wow, the turn 3 casino on its own, the amount of time he took off Kimi, the amount of minimum speed he was carrying was like, wow. Then 1 year, he was incredibly quick. Every single session, he was in top 3. And then FP, so that's the year. He could have won Monaco for sure, right? At least podium. And then what happens? FP3. So he's already done purple sectors. And then he was like top 3 on the timesheet again. And then we were going to come in, right? Rear tires already finished, so we were going to come in. Then Romain, but then at the back of the circuit, just like 30 seconds away from pit entry, Romain said, Ayao, can I do one more lap? Again, that's my lack of experience. I should have said, no, just come in. Rear tires already finished. I said, yes. Right. What happens? Next lap, he goes into turn 1, heavy crash. He's already said tires finished, right? And then he goes into turn 1, crashed, and he said like, something's broken, brake didn't work. I looked at it. He braked so much later into turn 1. Rear tires already finished. You can see visually rear tires grind. So rear's not there anymore. But he braked later than when he was on the brand new tire. So no wonder he crashed, right?
And that's his whole weekend gone.
Completely, because then we are rebuilding the car, right? But again, if I had a bit more experience, maturity, I would have been strong enough to say, no, Roman, rear tires finished. You've done your lap. Come in. There's no point. Then that wouldn't have happened. So that's my regret, for instance, right? But then, so that was a heavy crash, broke lots of things. And then, but then the teamwork after that going into Q1 was amazing though. So we are rebuilding the car. Of course, Q1's already started. As soon as Kimi's car went out of our garage, all the mechanics from Kimi's side of the garage, bang, came onto our car, Romain's car.
I love those things.
Yeah, I love it.
It gives you goosebumps.
Oh, completely. I was race engineer, helplessly standing, waiting for these guys to finish their work, shouting, like, get the car down on the ground, we need to go. And then my number mechanic shouting, like, we haven't even braked the brakes, we cannot send the car. I said, pump the brake pedal a couple of times, it'll be okay, we'll just send it. But it was amazing, huge teamwork. I can't remember how many people were working on that car. And then Romain already sitting in a car on the high stand, and then we send it out. And when we send it out, obviously he did purple sectors and he went through Q1, no problem. That was amazing moment.
Yeah.
Right. And then Q2, we hit the traffic and we are out. And then again, it was huge disappointment. So it's just an emotional roller coaster. But yeah, that I still remember those moments.
That's Formula 1.
Good and bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the greatest emotional roller coaster of your life in Formula 1 would have been the incident in Bahrain when Romain crashed.
Yeah.
And like the rest of the world, you were watching with and feeling totally powerless, I guess.
Oh, totally. Honestly, to start off with, very first instance, I didn't know it was Romain, right? And then the minute I realized it was Romain, obviously I'm thinking, he cannot be alive.
Yeah.
And he's my friend. He's my racing driver, but he's my friend. Just felt like eternity. And I actually didn't see him get out of the car and walking. And then one of the race engineers said on intercom, no, Romain's out.
Were you trying to talk to him before then?
No.
So there's no attempt at communicating with him after the crash?
No, I wasn't race engineer. So
you
race
didn't
engineer. So, but all I remember now is just big ball of fire, obviously.
And where were you at that time?
Pit wall.
You were on the pit wall?
Yeah. And then somebody told me that Romain's out of the car, but I didn't see it. But I said, are you sure he's out? Because I just couldn't believe he's out. And then when I saw him on the TV screen, okay, wow, he's out. Then I went to see him before he got airlifted to the hospital. I managed to catch glimpse of him and he gave me thumbs up. He was in the medical center. I was just outside. And then the guy at the medical center just let me into the certain point. And then he saw me and he gave me thumbs up. Okay, he's alive, right? And then we've done the race. And then Kevin, of course, hasn't physically seen him. So, it sounds stupid, but we are both the same. Kevin said to me, like, he still cannot believe Romain's alive. So he said that we need to go to the hospital to see him. I was the same. The reason I went to see him before he got airlifted to the hospital was, even though I saw it on TV, I just still can't comprehend that he's alive. I just I needed to see him in my own eyes that he's alive. And then let, his wife knows that, look, I've seen him, he's alive,
And did you go to the hospital?
Yeah. After the race, me and Kevin went to see Romain in the hospital, and he was already smiling then.
What did you say to him?
I can't remember what I said to him, but we just saw. I think we just said to him, I can't believe you're alive.
Yeah.
You are alive. You're still here. It's incredible. Yeah.
And the people who saw the chassis afterwards, what they talk about is the smell rather than what they saw.
Completely the smell. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. That Viton rubber burning smell is just horrible. And then looking at that chassis tab, you cannot imagine somebody can come out of this alive. It's horrible. And then when the chassis came back, there's still Romain's racing shoes stuck behind the pedal.
No.
Yeah. Because so his left foot, because again, so when he was in the car, he trying to pull himself out. He got to certain stage, and he realized his left foot is stuck behind the pedal. So he had to then bring himself back down so that he can grip something, hold of something, and gain power to pull his leg out. So when he did that, of course, his foot come off the racing shoes. So racing shoes is still stuck in the cockpit behind the pedal. And then he put his left hand in the flame of fire in the halo and then pushed himself and came out. But what was really moving was, so they let me watch the onboard footage. Of course, onboard footage to the public cuts out, right, the minute you have that kind of serious accident. But since Romain made it alive, and then they let me watch it so that I can understand, is there any safety feature improvement we can make, etc. But when I was watching that footage, what was so moving was you can tell, but Romain Grosjean never gave up surviving, not just for himself, but for his wife, for his kids. You can see he never gave up. Incredible. And then every single decision he made was correct in the cockpit to get him out of the car. If he made one wrong decision, and if he spent another 5-10 seconds in that point, he could have been dead. His Normex, etc. In terms of timing, I can't remember the timing. If it was certified to, let's say, honestly, I can't remember the time, certain minutes to be a fireproof, that was right on the limit. So only bad burn he had was his hand, because he had to put his hand in the flame of fire to push himself up. But again, the moment he realized his foot was stuck, if he spent a bit longer in that position trying to pull his leg out, he probably failed to do that, and he might have been dead. But he made a decision to go back in when he's surrounded by fire, right? So that he can gain strength in terms of body position to pull his leg out. So everything was correct. But it's funny, when I was talking with Romain afterwards, after having seen the footage, and then saw him like, you are so brave going back down to then pull your leg out because you are surrounded by fire at that stage. And the interesting thing Romain said, yeah, but at that point, I wasn't surrounded by fire. No, Romain, you are, fire everywhere. But interesting, as a human survival instinct, I think that completely blocked out all the fire surrounding.
So he didn't, in his head, he wasn't in a fireball.
At that point, he saw that came later.
After.
Yeah. So then, I don't know, maybe it's the subconscious human survival mechanism that allows you to have a courage to go back in, to then pull your leg out. Then he realized he was, but I saw the footage go, clearly he was completely surrounded by fire.
I mean, it's an incredible thing to talk about, because your entire job, right, is to try and get a group of people and the two drivers to find their human limits.
Yes.
And to push the limit of a car to the very edge.
Yeah.
And I think it's only in a moment when you would have watched the onboard footage that, we haven't seen, is that actually it gives you an insight into what a human being can do when they really need to fight.
Absolutely.
And you were seeing a man fighting for his life. And I think about that shoe, because it's important to let people know, if they don't, that Formula 1 drivers don't wear shoes, they wear boots, right?
Yes.
So he's wearing a race boot that would have been, and also those race boots are tight,
yes.
Because you need to have a great connection with the pedal. So we are talking about finding the fight to pull a tightly laced boot off your leg in that moment. I mean, that is...
Yeah. Essentially forcing you to dislocate your ankle or something
easily
just to pull yourself out.
Yeah.
But he had to do that, and he did it. But every single movement he did, decision he made was correct.
That he was facing this way.
Yeah.
And the way to live is to go that way.
Yeah.
I don't even, that's what gets me. Once he's out the car,
Yeah.
surrounded by fire, to know that the barrier is there and that's where the medic sides. I mean, if people, don't believe in something else, something higher, you have to watch that and think that maybe something else was going on.
But seriously, it's just the fact that he never gave up that was so inspirational. And I told this to Marion as in Roman's wife. And then Marion said, I want to see. I said, no, you shouldn't see. But then Marion said, no, I want to see. I said, are you sure? Then she watched it and she said it really helped her tremendously. And I get it totally, because imagine seeing your husband never ever gave up, tried everything until the very, very last moment just to get out of that for you and your kids. How powerful is that? Honestly, that was one of, or if not the most moving thing I've ever seen.
And you're a dad.
Yes.
So you can relate to the emotion.
100%. And then the fact that he walked across the track was because he wanted to show to his family back at home on TV that Dad is okay, he's walking. Because they offered to take him on a stretcher to the car. He insisted on walking, with the aid so that he can show to his wife and kids that Dad's okay. Amazing, yeah?
Amazing. And how did it change your mindset, or how does it work for you now that your job is still to build a car for a driver to climb in and drive at over 200 kilometers an hour? Did it change the way that you thought about life or motor racing or not?
I don't think it did, really, because you know that you're always next to danger. Of course, that's in your face, that you nearly lost a friend, dear friend, like a Romain, and then my kids are similar age. His first two kids are exactly the same age as my first two kids. So we are like family friends, right? Almost coming to losing family friends like that was scary, to say the least. But in that way, it didn't change. But of course, like I always believing in living for the moment, because you got to appreciate the moment you got. And if there's something you want to do, you better do it now rather than saying, let's do it tomorrow, let's come back next year. No. You got to do it now. For instance, when I was younger, let's say when I was winning championship at the Renault in 2006, I thought, okay, we can win championship again in 2008, 9, whatever. But no, that is a precious moment. You may never win it again. So you got to make most of it.
Yeah.
Those things gradually, you really begin to realize. But so it's not just one thing, but again, that reaffirmed, let's say, my belief that you really have to be grateful the moment you've got, like right now.
Yeah.
You got to make most of it.
I think so. And also learning to live without regrets, I guess. I know that you lost your dad when you were relatively young, only 19 years of age, and your dad had this incredible story of a political prisoner. I know that you, in my research for this, I know that you and your mum took a trip to Germany after he'd passed away, and you had an emotional moment in a museum where you found a book that he'd been involved in. And I just wonder whether, and I've heard you talk about the fact that you didn't feel you were fully present or weren't respectful enough of who your dad was maybe when he was alive, and whether you think about that when you think about having no regrets.
For sure. Like I wasn't a great kid. I was very rebellious. I was angry at lots of things, authority, adults, school teachers. I was very, very angry kid. So I don't think I was behaving in a very good manner. And then the fact that he passed away before I could show him that, I could, let's say, live, if you like. He must have been so worried when I said I'm going to UK because I want to do Formula 1 in the future. He must have thought, oh my God, that Ayao, irresponsible, rebellious.
What about brave and courageous and full of self-belief? He might have thought all those things as well.
That would have been nice if he thought that, but I don't think that my behavior when I was like 14 to 18, I don't think it wasn't correct. And then I don't know, now I'm a father, but from his side, he must have been so worried. I don't know what gave him belief that I could do it responsibly. Maybe he thought, but honestly, he said both my mom and dad said, okay, if that's what you want to do, go for it, chase it. So I'm really, really grateful about that. I remember I was 14 when I thought I want to do this, the Formula 1. Everybody said, don't be so stupid, you'll never make it. Just go to university in Japan, get a job. But then only my parents, my mom and dad said, if that's what you really want to do, just figure out how to do it, just go for it. So I'm really grateful about that. I still remember having, you have this parents' evening, right? So at the high school, so how old was I? Coming to 18, the final year of high school, this parents meeting with my mom and my teacher, and he said to me, you should just try to go to university in Japan, because somebody like you, if you go to UK, you're gonna get addicted to drugs and you're gonna be a failure. That's literally what he said. You're gonna be a drug addict, and then you will achieve nothing. Come back to Japan. Then he said to me like, when you are homeless and then in living in a cardboard box house in outside of Shinjuku station, then when you shout at me saying, "Oh, Mr. Mana, I'm gonna ignore you." So literally, teacher said that in front of my mom. I was that bad. So I just said to him, "Don't worry, I'm not gonna fail. But even if I fail, I will never ever ask for your help. So don't worry about it." So I said, "Mom, come on, let's go."
You need to track that teacher down if he's still alive and give him a VIP pass to come and meet the team principal of the Haas Formula One team at a race this season.
But I wasn't a very good kid. So to be fair to him, like, I understand why he said it.
Maybe.
His delivery wasn't correct. But I get why he said it, because I wasn't a very good kid.
Well, look, those moments are all part of our story, right? You being written off by that teacher, struggling with your own emotions, the life that you've lived in Formula One, the highs, the lows, the challenges, all the things we've spoken about are actually all necessary for you to have made it to this point and be the team principal that you are. And for the Haas F1 fans that are watching this conversation, just to finish off with, as we look ahead to 2026, what would you like them to understand about your ambitions for the team this coming season?
Coming season, no doubt it's going to be a tough season. We are still the smallest team. We're making lots of improvement. I think in terms of the way we support each other, help each other moving with the common goal, it's really good. We are becoming a good team, but still we are the smallest team. So the huge regulation change, we are up against it. But what I believe in is whatever is thrown at us in January, February, March, when we run the car in the very early part of the season, the belief that 2 years in a row, we are able to develop the hell out of the car and finish the season 5th fastest car, give us a lots of confidence. We can tackle anything.
Regs. You might have found a golden bullet. You might go out at that very first test in just a few days' time and be the fastest car.
I don't like to keep hoping, because if you just keep hoping, you don't achieve anything. You got to be able to do something substantial. You cannot just say, "Oh, this year was really bad. Forget about it. Next year will be good." What have you done to make next year better?
Okay, what about evidence then? Williams went from 17 points to 137 points, 9th on the grid to 5th on the grid. It can be done.
It can be done, but Williams and us are totally different teams, right?
Yeah.
Williams is actually very big team. They got like 1,000 people, and then they've got most of the things that's available to them. But the guys done amazing job. They were struggling at the bottom of the field for few years, but they had that enough belief in themselves to build it up, not get lost in a short-term objective. And then this is the result. Hats off to them. But we don't have the same, let's say, resource as Williams. So we got to gradually build up that kind of resource as well. So it's a totally different environment. But each 10 teams from next year, it's 11 teams. Everybody's got different environment, right? So the way to success for each team is different. So, but then the good thing about our team is got good people, great people, really great synergy, and then we are pure race team. So
love it.
And then we focused on what we need to achieve, and then we just really trying to be inclusive, support each other. So
good.
Looking forward to it.
Well, I'm excited already. I've got a few quickfire questions to finish with. What are the 3 non-negotiable behaviors that you think are most important in life?
For me, respect, humility. I don't know, humbleness comes very close to humility. And then, those are non-negotiable.
Very good. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
From my parents, like, okay, if that's what you want to do, you can do anything, just go for it. So for me, lots of people ask me, like, how you made it to Formula One? Since you were a kid, you wanted to do Formula, you made it. Do you think I can do it? I say, of course you can. Don't think about, if you think about your objective is there, if you're trying to imagine every single step you have to take, it's too daunting, right? I always say, just don't think about that. Don't think about the consequence, just to take the first step. Once you take the first step, that will show you will see what the step number 2, 3, 4 looks like. Don't worry about step 100 when you haven't made a step. So for most of the things in life, I believe if you try it, you can do it. So just take that first step.
I love that. What's your biggest strength?
Strengths, I guess it's the determination of the ability to take. I don't think anything is impossible. Most of the things, like I said, if you put your mind to it, you can do it. So I don't take no for no.
What's your greatest weakness?
Weakness, I think, controlling my emotion, I guess.
Yeah.
Especially it's important as a leader. I get very impatient or frustrated about, let's say, certain issues we face. But, I, I need to be more patient. And then, I think that's probably the weakness. Yeah.
What would you say to a young Ayao just starting out in life?
Listen to your dad a bit more, because my dad always said to me, the hard work, the work ethic is more important than the talent. But for me, my dad was very, very talented guy. So I thought that is a lie, because you're saying that because you're so talented. But then so I thought, unless you have a talent, it's no point trying. It's so wrong. So that was me when I was like 12, 13, 14. But then once I decided I want to do Formula One, the fact that I wasn't talented in math and physics didn't matter, because I want to do Formula One. To do Formula One, I need to study math and physics. Doesn't matter if I'm not talented, right? If somebody can do this problem in 5 minutes, it takes me 2 hours. So be it. Is what you're gonna do about it, right? So for me, the ability to put yourself, immerse yourself, and then to be never giving up, never leaving anything on the table. That ability is so important. I want to tell my 12 years old, when I was 12 years old, now listen to your dad. That is much more important than having a talent.
For sure. And the final question, what is the golden rule, do you think, to living a high performance life?
For me, it's a relentless pursuit of excellence, perfection. Every single time you got to look at yourself, you look at the environment, how can we make another step? How can we make an improvement? Just keep thinking that if you are comfortable, you haven't tried yourself, you haven't tried hard enough. I think every day you got to think about, okay, have you put yourself out of your comfort zone once today? If you haven't tried hard enough.
I've loved that conversation.
Thank you very much.
I cheer you on, by the way, because I'm a bit of a Formula One purist, and I see a lot of teams backed by venture capitalists, or I see teams backed by car manufacturers, and I don't see very many teams anymore that are a racer like Gene Haas, in the mold of Eddie Jordan, a good friend of mine,
right,
putting his money in, creating a small, scrappy, aggressive team.
Yeah.
You've gone for a guy in Esteban Ocon who had to fight to get into Formula One, a guy through Ollie Bearman who's got this amazing talent and he needs someone to channel it into the right place. And I think in you, Haas have an amazing leader. And
thank you.
Very interesting what you said about the culture previously and where it is now. And I think your legacy is not necessarily just winning races and picking up points. Your legacy is changing a culture in a team that allows the next generation of Formula One mechanics, engineers and drivers to thrive. So.
Thank you, because that's what we're trying to build. For me, the result is result. You cannot control result 100%, right? Some of it is out of your hands. But what you can control is your process. So our process is like believing our core values. We want to build a race-winning team in the distant future with that core value, not diverting from that. And I believe we can do it. So,
Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much.